Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. A college football playoff working group has recommended a 12-team playoff. We had reports earlier in the week from our Dennis Dodd that an expansion of the college football playoff was likely coming, that it would be at least 8. The big news today is that the recommendation is that it would be a 12-team playoff with the top 4 teams getting a bye and the first round being played on campus, which would really set this up to be more of an NFL-like playoff for college football. We have Dennis Dodd joining us now on CBS Sports HQ. Dennis, you've been calling around following this story. Give us the up-to-the-minute details on what you've learned today.
Well, the 10 commissioners and Notre Dame AD Jack Swarbrick that make up the management council, which runs the college football playoff, is going to recommend a 12-team playoff beginning at the earliest 2023, which will include, as I said, 12 teams, 6 auto bids, and then 6 at-large teams. Now, the 6 auto bid thing is interesting because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 5 Power 5s and then 1 Group of 5, because if any of those conferences in the Group of 5 have a conference champion ranked higher, a second team from those schools ranked higher than any Power 5 champion, then they could get in. So it could be 4 and 2. And so that's a big concession. I think that's why this gets rubber stamped then by June 22nd when the presidents meet, the board of managers who oversee the CFP. I think it's just a rubber stamp at that point for this thing to begin.
Yeah, Dennis, to your point, last season we would have had 2 Group of 5 teams in this college football playoff, with Cincinnati out of the American and Coastal Carolina out of the Sun Belt, because Oregon out of the Pac-12 was ranked lower than those teams. Again, the recommendation is that it's the 6th highest ranked conference champions. So you could have multiple Group of 5 teams getting in. This would really level the playing field, to so to speak anyway, for the Group of 5. What would it take, in your opinion, for this not to be improved, for this not to be implemented in the next few years?
Well, because there's 5 years left on the current contract with the CFP and ESPN, and there's some pretty heavy lifting that would have to be done for this to start within the next 5 years. All Bill Hancock, the executive director, said it'll be at least 2, because that's what it took once the commissioners in college football decided to go from 2 to 4 for the playoff. It took them 2 years to implement it, so it's going to take at least that long. The contract going forward is 5 years. That's interesting because you've got the bowls involved. You've got ESPN having to make a massive decision that they want to tear up in the middle of a 12-year contract, a $7.2 billion deal, and pay more. The other side of that is it would give them cost certainty into the future. The CFP wouldn't go out to bid. They have exclusive negotiating rights until late in that contract. So that would be a reason why ESPN does it. But I think the biggest hang up that, it may last the next 5 years, in other words, the current 4-team playoff, is the bowl contracts are tremendously complicated. What do you do with the Rose Bowl in a situation like this, where the Rose Bowl demands to be played January 1st at 2 o'clock Pacific every year? The Rose Bowl, the way it's structured right now, would have to rotate through, going into the 8 teams quarterfinals and then being part of the semifinals, every other year. They would have to rotate through there. So what happens in years when they don't have a college football playoff semifinal or quarterfinal, or is the Rose Bowl locked into that for perpetuity?
One of the more exciting things about this recommendation is that we could get some on-campus games. But for the at-large teams in this proposal, do you take that to mean the next highest-ranked teams, or could this be completely subjective like we have in college basketball?
Well, it's going to be subjective the way it's structured now, because it's subjective. We have a selection committee. So where those teams land on the ranking will tell if they're at large or not. But we haven't gotten that far. In fact, we don't know for sure they're going to be campus sites. In my reporting, I think it's going to be that way. But nothing out of the information today has gone that far. But yeah, the at-large teams, I think, are going to be the at-large teams unless they adjust the way they pick teams. And everybody in general, seems to be happy with the selection committee.
Okay, Dennis, so this is the recommendation today from the College Football Playoff Working Group. What happens next?
Next Thursday and Friday, as I said, the management committee, which is made up of those 10 commissioners and Notre Dame, will then talk through this. They will vet it, in other words, and I would say probably make a formal recommendation to the Board of Managers, which then meets June 22nd later this month. So I think by the end of the day on June 22nd, we're formally going to have a 12-team playoff. And the only question will be, sitting here right now, is when it's going to start. And whenever it's going to start, it's going to be fascinating to watch the machinations of that go through, how it's assembled, what teams look like, if they're going to keep, as I said, the selection committee. It's going to be fun as hell to watch.
And as Dennis reported earlier, the earliest it could be implemented would likely be 2023, which is only 2 years away. So we may only have 2 years left of this 4-team system before we get a massive threefold college football playoff with 12 teams in it and 4 teams with a bye. Dennis Dodd working on this for us today. He will come back if anything else develops. These are the odds to win this season's college football playoff. Alabama, the favorite at 3-1. Clemson 4-1. Ohio State 7-1. And Oklahoma, the only of those top 4 teams with a returning quarterback, Spencer Rattler, the Heisman favorite, at 8-1.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.